Welcome to the Bare Metal Cyber Audio Magazine. Each edition brings you sharp insights and fresh perspectives from the world of cybersecurity, straight to your ears. For more resources and content, visit baremetalcyber.com or cyberauthor.me. Let's dive in. Acronyms have become the background noise of cybersecurity. Every conference booth, every vendor pitch, and every white paper seems to lead with a new three-letter abbreviation that promises to save your network from disaster. EDR, NDR, XDR, MDR, they all blur together until the message feels more like alphabet soup than actionable guidance. Then, of course, comes the cynical joke, Wtf-Dr. As funny as it is, there's a grain of truth in that quip. Many professionals feel overwhelmed, frustrated, and even paralyzed by the jargon storm. This episode begins by cutting through that fog. Instead of treating these terms as buzzwords, we're going to examine what each really means, how they work, and why the distinctions matter in practice. The problem with acronym overload isn't just confusion, it's risk. Misunderstanding what a tool does leads to costly mistakes. Duplicate investments, wasted budgets, and worst of all, blind spots that attackers can exploit. Imagine an organization convinced their EDR solution covers everything, only to discover during an incident that it had no visibility into unmanaged devices or east-west traffic. That gap becomes the entry point for an adversary. Acronyms can distract teams from focusing on outcomes, creating a dangerous illusion of security. This conversation aims to ground us back in reality, moving past vendor hype and focusing on the capabilities that genuinely matter. Our approach will be practical, honest, and maybe a little irreverent. We'll dissect each acronym, not as a marketing slogan, but as a function in the bigger picture of detection and response. EDR's strengths and limits, NDR's wide-angle view, XDR's promise and pitfalls, MDR's human dimension, and finally the satirical but insightful Wtf-Dr perspective. Think of it like a field guide, a map through the acronym jungle. By the end, you'll not only know what these terms stand for, you'll know how to position them in your own security strategy without wasting time or money. Acronyms fade, but outcomes remain, and that's where our journey begins. Endpoint detection and response, or EDR, is where most security teams first encounter the detection and response family of tools. The idea is straightforward. Attackers almost always need to execute something malicious on a device to make progress. EDR focuses on the host itself, installing lightweight agents that monitor activity like process creation, registry changes, file modifications, and outbound network connections. This telemetry feeds into a central system where analysts can investigate suspicious behavior, reconstruct timelines, and, if needed, take action directly on the machine. That action can mean isolating the endpoint from the network, killing a process midstream, or even rolling back files encrypted by ransomware. The immediacy of EDR, its ability to both detect and respond in real time, has made it the standard for frontline defense. But while EDR shines in visibility and speed, it has very real limitations. Its scope begins and ends with the endpoints where its agent is installed. That leaves unmanaged devices, operational technology, and IoT completely outside its field of view. Even within managed systems, attackers exploit blind spots. Lateral movement, for instance, may appear as normal credential use from one machine to another, escaping EDR's radar entirely. Encryption further complicates the picture, hiding the contents of malicious communications. This doesn't mean EDR is useless, far from it. It means defenders who treat EDR as their entire strategy are building a castle with missing walls. Attackers know exactly where those walls end, and they adapt accordingly. Vendors often describe their products as next-gen EDR, layering in machine learning or cloud analytics. While these features can enhance detection, the fundamentals remain the same: granular endpoint visibility and quick containment. The differences between products often lie less in raw capability and more in how they integrate with larger security ecosystems. Some platforms excel at custom detection logic, others at automating playbooks or scaling across tens of thousands of devices. The key for organizations is to evaluate EDR not as a magic bullet, but as a cornerstone, something you absolutely need, but something that must be reinforced with complementary technologies. Understanding where EDR ends is just as important as understanding what it does well, because those blind spots define the next layer of defense you'll need to add. Network detection and response, or NDR, is the counterbalance to endpoint-focused tools. Where EDR peers inside a single device, NDR listens to the highways of communication between them. It gathers data from packet flows, session metadata, and protocol behavior, building a wide-angle picture of how systems talk to each other. That perspective is invaluable because many attacks reveal themselves not in a single process, but in the subtle patterns across traffic. For example, a compromised server quietly sending regular encrypted bursts at odd hours may slip past endpoint defenses, but NDR sees the cadence and flags it. By treating conversations as evidence, NDR excels at spotting anomalies that betray command and control channels, stealthy exfiltration, or reconnaissance campaigns. Its power comes not from watching individuals, but from studying the rhythm of the crowd. The biggest payoff from NDR is in east-west visibility, the lateral movement that often decides whether a compromise stays contained or becomes a breach. Attackers rarely stop at the first endpoint they compromise. Instead, they pivot, probing for additional access and using stolen credentials to hop across the environment. To EDR, those actions may look legitimate, but NDR stitches them together, revealing unusual authentication spikes, strange protocol use, or data transfers that defy the baseline. This perspective makes NDR a natural complement to endpoint monitoring, shining light on activities that unfold in the spaces between devices. In complex enterprises, where thousands of systems talk every second, the ability to catch deviations across the network is what prevents attackers from silently expanding their foothold. Another strength of NDR is its reach into unmanaged or agentless devices. Modern networks are full of things that can't run endpoint agents: printers, cameras, IoT gadgets, even legacy OT systems that keep factories running. These devices are often ignored by traditional security tools, but they still generate traffic. NDR hears that traffic and can flag when it looks off. A security camera beaconing to an IP in another country, or a printer pushing large encrypted files outside the network may look innocuous at a glance, but, in aggregate, stand out. That broader lens helps organizations secure environments where nearly everything has an IP address, but not everything can be directly defended. In this sense, NDR acts like a spotlight on the forgotten corners of modern IT, ensuring attackers can't simply hide in devices no one thought to monitor. Still, NDR isn't flawless. Encryption obscures payloads, leaving defenders with metadata, timing, size, and endpoints as their main clues. Skilled adversaries exploit this by blending in with legitimate services like Microsoft 365 or Google Drive, camouflaging exfiltration in plain sight. Deployment is also a hurdle, often requiring careful placement of span ports or taps. And in hybrid or cloud-first networks, visibility gaps are common. Without tuning, NDR can drown analysts in false positives. This is why its greatest strength emerges in combination with endpoint tools. NDR identifies suspicious flows, and EDR confirms what process or user generated them. Together, they create a closed loop of detection that mirrors how attackers operate, across systems, across protocols, and across time. Alone, each tool is useful. Together, they are formidable. Extended Detection and Response, or XDR, is often marketed as the answer to acronym fatigue, the single pane of glass that ties everything together. At its core, XDR promises to collect signals from across the enterprise, stitching endpoint, network, cloud, email, and identity data into one coherent storyline. Instead of juggling multiple dashboards, analysts can see how a suspicious login, a malicious attachment, and an odd DNS request relate to one another. That's the theory. The reality, however, depends heavily on how the platform is built and how it's deployed. Some XDR solutions deliver meaningful cross-domain insights. Others simply aggregate alerts in a prettier interface, offering little more than rebranded SIEM functionality. This gap between promise and practice makes it essential to look past marketing slides and measure what XDR can actually do in your environment. There are two dominant flavors of XDR, and both carry trade-offs. Native XDR is tightly integrated within a single vendor's ecosystem. Because all components were built under one roof, data is easier to normalize, workflows are smoother, and the user experience tends to feel polished. The downside is lock-in. Once you commit, it's hard to mix and match tools outside that ecosystem. OpenXDR, on the other hand, claims flexibility, pulling signals from multiple vendors and correlating them. While appealing on paper, this approach struggles with data normalization. Different systems log events in different formats, and aligning them is messy. Without careful engineering, OpenXDR risks turning into a loose collection of half-integrated parts. Buyers need to be clear-eyed about these distinctions before making a choice. The difference between correlation and true detection engineering is another critical issue. Good XDR doesn't just show that 3 alerts happened in the same time frame, it builds a meaningful narrative. A brute force login attempt should connect to an endpoint process spawning unusual activity, which should tie to outbound traffic patterns. That kind of storytelling shortens investigation time and helps analysts act decisively. Many vendors advertise alert reduction as the big selling point, claiming their platforms cut 70 or 80% of noise. But fewer alerts aren't automatically better. If fidelity suffers, you risk missing the one event that matters. The real metric for XDR effectiveness isn't fewer notifications. It's whether attackers are caught faster and dwell time is reduced. Anything less is just window dressing. Data gravity is where many organizations get surprised. XDR platforms ingest mountains of telemetry, and storing, querying, and analyzing that data isn't free. Vendors may advertise generous ingestion during pilots, only to reveal complex pricing based on retention tiers, query volume, or API usage later. The result can be budget creep that spirals out of control. That's why testing XDR properly requires more than clicking through dashboards. Run real-world scenarios using frameworks like MITRE ATT&CK. Measure how quickly the system correlates steps in an attack chain, how clear the incident narrative is, and whether your team can act faster. Ask what happens when you scale log ingestion by 10-fold or 20-fold. If the platform buckles under that weight, or your budget does, then you know it's not a sustainable fit. In the end, XDR can be a powerful unifying layer, but only if it delivers measurable improvements rather than just consolidating acronyms. Managed Detection and Response, or MDR, shifts the spotlight away from technology and toward people. Where EDR, NDR, and XDR focus on tools and platforms, MDR is about outsourcing expertise. It offers a team of analysts who monitor, investigate, and respond to threats on your behalf, providing around-the-clock coverage. For many organizations, the appeal is obvious. Instead of struggling to staff a 24/7 security operations center, you rent one. If a ransomware attack hits at 3 in the morning, you don't have to rely on an exhausted IT generalist. Your MDR provider already has specialists awake, watching, and ready to take action. In this sense, MDR isn't just another acronym. It's a service designed to close the human gap that technology alone can't fill. The models for MDR vary widely, and that's where buyers often stumble. Some providers focus only on triage, reviewing alerts and passing them back to your team for action. Others offer co-managed setups, where responsibilities are split, with containment decisions still resting with your staff. Fully managed services take it further, handling isolation, account disabling, and remediation directly. And then there's MXDR, a bundled offering where vendors combine their XDR platform with a managed service. These models can save time and extend capability, but they also create trade-offs. Co-managed services give you control but may delay action. Fully managed offerings give speed, but sometimes at the cost of visibility. MXDR can streamline operations, but almost always locks you into a single vendor ecosystem. Knowing which model aligns with your needs is as important as choosing the provider itself. That's why service-level agreements, or SLAs, are the fine print that matter most. On paper, every MDR vendor promises quick response, but the definitions vary. How fast is their mean time to detect? What's their average mean time to respond once an alert is confirmed? Do they have the authority to quarantine endpoints or disable accounts, or do they wait for your sign-off? And how do they communicate in the middle of a crisis? Through slow-moving tickets or in real-time channels like phone calls or Slack? The answers to these questions often determine whether an incident is contained in minutes or spirals into a full-blown breach. A good MDR partner becomes an extension of your team. A weak one simply adds another layer of delay. The larger question hovering over MDR is whether to build or buy. Standing up your own security operations center is expensive, requiring specialized talent and relentless 24/7 staffing. Burnout is common and turnover is high. For many organizations, especially smaller ones, outsourcing makes more sense financially and operationally. But outsourcing also means entrusting part of your defense to another company. If the provider is misaligned with your priorities, floods you with low-value alerts, or hesitates in moments that demand quick action, the results can be as bad as not having them at all. When MDR is done well, it amplifies your defenses and gives even small teams enterprise-level resilience. Done poorly, it becomes an expensive false comfort. That's why evaluating MDR is less about comparing acronyms and more about asking, who will pick up the phone at 2 a.m. and what will they actually do when they answer? The term Wtf-Dr started as a joke, but it perfectly captures the exasperation many security teams feel when faced with yet another acronym promising salvation. Vendors flood the market with labels, EDR, NDR, XDR, MDR, each claiming to be essential, each blurring into the next. The result is fatigue. Professionals stop listening, or worse, they start believing that buying the latest acronym automatically makes them safe. The reality is more complicated. These categories evolve to fill gaps, but in practice they overlap heavily. A vendor might claim their EDR doubles as an XDR, or that their MXDR is more than just managed services. When definitions stretch, buyers are left confused and vulnerable. WTF-DR, then, is less a joke than a survival mindset. Stop chasing jargon, start demanding clarity, and ask the only question that matters. Does this tool reduce risk in my environment? One way to escape acronym fatigue is to map technology adoption against organizational maturity. For companies early in their security journey, endpoint protection and detection may provide the biggest return on investment because most attacks still begin on the endpoint. As the environment grows more complex, adding network visibility with NDR becomes critical. MDR makes sense when staffing can't keep up with the workload, providing human support around the clock. XDR may add value when alert fatigue becomes overwhelming, as long as it genuinely correlates and enriches signals instead of simply consolidating them. Thinking in terms of maturity rather than marketing cycles helps cut through noise. It replaces what's trending with what's necessary right now, which is a healthier way to decide. Procurement is another minefield where acronyms can derail good judgment. Vendors excel at polished demos and proof of concepts, showcasing environments where detections fire instantly and data flows seamlessly. Reality is rarely so clean. Hybrid networks, cloud platforms, and legacy systems create messy data that tools don't always handle well. That's why adversary-driven testing is essential. Instead of admiring dashboards, run attack simulations. Watch how quickly the system detects lateral movement, whether it correlates identity misuse with endpoint processes, and how clear the resulting incident report is for analysts. Also ask about cost models, hidden ingestion fees, retention limits, and premium charges for API access. Acronyms don't reveal these pitfalls, but contracts do. Cutting through hype means interrogating details until promises meet practical reality. At its core, Wtf-Dr is a reminder that acronyms don't stop breaches, capabilities do. Attackers don't care what you call your toolset. They only care whether your defenses can recognize and respond to their moves. That's why organizations should evaluate detection and response investments not by name, but by outcome. Does it help contain attacks faster? Does it confirm suspicious behavior with higher confidence? Does it correlate disparate signals into meaningful stories? Does it provide coverage where gaps exist? If the answer is yes, then the acronym doesn't matter. If the answer is no, then even the flashiest new category won't help. In a market that thrives on buzzwords, WTF-DR thinking is the sanity check. Keep outcomes at the center and let the labels fade into the background where they belong. Building a practical detection stack is less about collecting acronyms and more about assembling the right layers of visibility and response for your environment. The temptation is always to chase the shiniest new category. Vendors make it sound like XDR or MDR alone will solve everything. But the reality is that strong security comes from a progression. For most organizations, the journey starts with EDR because endpoints remain the front door for phishing, ransomware, and credential theft. Without endpoint visibility, everything else is guesswork. Once that foundation is in place, the next layer is NDR, adding visibility into lateral movement and unmanaged devices. These two together, host-level monitoring and network-wide oversight, form a powerful baseline. It's only after those foundations are in place that adding managed services or cross-domain correlation truly makes sense. The sequence matters because each step solves a different problem. EDR tells you what happened on a machine, but not how the attacker spread. NDR shows you the spread, but not which process initiated it. MDR brings in the people to watch the alerts when you can't, adding resilience against time zone gaps or staffing shortages. XDR tries to unify it all, which is valuable only if you already have strong signal sources in place. If you buy XDR too early, it's just a fancy dashboard collecting weak data. Thinking strategically about order prevents wasted investments and ensures every acronym translates into measurable capability. The right combination fills gaps without creating duplication. Examples help illustrate how this layering works in practice. Imagine a mid-sized company deploying EDR first. It stops a ransomware outbreak, But the team discovers attackers also touched unmanaged devices. That leads to adding NDR, which reveals lateral traffic they couldn't see before. As the environment grows, the team can't keep up with alerts, so they adopt MDR for 24/7 coverage. Only then, with EDR and NDR data flowing, does XDR provide meaningful correlation by tying together identity misuse, endpoint anomalies, and suspicious traffic into one incident storyline. At each step, the adoption was based on a real need, not a vendor acronym. That's how layering delivers results. Each piece builds on the last, solving problems as they appear. The final element of a practical stack is detection engineering. Tools don't defend by themselves. They defend when tuned to your environment. Out-of-the-box rules catch generic threats, but real attackers use your configurations, your credentials, and your workflows against you. Detection engineering means building custom logic, mapping detections to frameworks like MITRE ATT, and testing them regularly with red team simulations. This glue holds the stack together, making sure each acronym tool speaks the language of your specific environment. Without it, even the most expensive stack will underperform. With it, even modest investments become powerful. Acronyms aside, the ultimate measure is whether your detection stack shortens response times, increases confidence, and denies attackers the space they need to succeed. That's the test of a practical, layered defense. The swirl of acronyms, EDR, NDR, XDR, MDR, and even the tongue-in-cheek Wtf-Dr can feel like an industry that has lost its way in alphabet games. But step back, and the story is simpler. Each represents a different angle of the same fight. Endpoints, networks, cross-domain views, and human expertise all contribute to closing gaps that attackers exploit. The danger comes when organizations buy tools for the acronym rather than the outcome. This conversation has unpacked what each technology really does, where it overlaps, and how they can be layered to build a resilient defense. The labels may change, but the principles remain steady: contain, confirm, correlate, and cover. Those four actions define whether an attack is stopped early or allowed to grow into a breach. The legacy of this discussion is a challenge to rethink priorities. Don't let vendor hype or trendy acronyms dictate strategy. Anchor your detection and response plan in measurable outcomes: shorter dwell times, faster containment, stronger visibility, and then choose the tools and services that get you there. Acronyms will keep coming, and new buzzwords will surely arrive. But attackers don't care what you call your stack. They care only about whether you can stop them. If your defenses are layered with purpose, tuned for your environment, and backed by capable people, then the alphabet soup becomes background noise. What matters is that your organization is prepared, resilient, and ready to fight back. Thanks for listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Audio Newsletter. Stay sharp, stay secure, and explore more resources at baremetalcyber.com or cyberauthor.me.